Magandang hapon po. Let me say first, sorry po for the nosebleed, because my Tagalog is now finished. The rest is in English. I bring greetings to you from Redeemer Church of Dubai. We were there this morning worshiping the Lord, and we love you. We are excited about what the Lord is doing here through Crossroads. As Erickson was saying, my wife, Donita, and I have 6 children. Now, my wife, I'm from Australia. My wife is from South Africa. And then all my other children were either born or adopted here. So we adopted Matthew and Brianna from Ethiopia 2 years ago. A fun fact about our family, we are born in 5 different countries. Australia, South Africa, Oman, UAE, and Ethiopia. We're international. And one of the things that we love to do as a family is we love to watch YouTube videos of American Idol. But I recently discovered that it's not the only country that has Idol. Of course, you know this already. There is Chinese Idol, Pinoy Idol, Nigerian Idol, Harvardsky Idol, that's in Croatia, and my favorite, Deutschland sucht den Superstar in Germany. In fact, there are 49 different country versions of the Idol series. But it doesn't stop there. There's the whole Got Talent series. Did you know that there are 64 versions of Got Talent? India's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent. It seems even Australia's Got Talent. It is a worldwide phenomenon. People just love the spotlight. They'll do anything to get their 5 minutes of glory and fame. And that is what makes the show successful. But have you ever thought that maybe singing might not be all about entertainment? Maybe singing has a bigger purpose than just my own glory. So this morning, we're going to look at Psalm 96, and my prayer for us is that we would see the glory of the Lord in His Word, and that it would stir our hearts to worship Him, to sing to Him in all areas of our life. So I want to propose a sentence that summarizes the message of Psalm 96. It is this: sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord among the nations. Sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord among the nations. And that really is our 3 points, which will be our outline this morning. Awitin ang kaluwalhatian ng Diyos, sing the glory of the Lord. Umawit sa Panginoon, sing to the Lord. Umawit sa lahat ng lahi, sing among the nations. So, our first point, awitin ang kaluwalhatian ng Diyos. Now, sometimes when we read the Psalms, we read them as if they were written directly to me. We forget that they were songs written by a person from a different culture in a different time. And so to understand the Bible and the Psalms especially, we have to do some work to remember who's writing them. Psalm 96, in this form, actually appears twice in the Bible. Maybe you remember the story of King David, and he was bringing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to Jerusalem. Now, the Ark is a chest made of acacia wood, and it contained the 10 Commandments. It was the physical symbol of God's presence among His people. Now, King Saul had died, and David had been crowned king, and he had just defeated the Philistines. The Lord was establishing David's kingdom. And so, with great joy, David is bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. David is dancing and he's celebrating. And there's trumpets and cymbals and harps and lyres. And they place the Ark inside the tent. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And then, at that point, in 1 Chronicles chapter 16, David appoints Asaph and his brothers to sing this song to the Lord, to sing Psalm 96. And it's a song that people have been singing for nearly 3,000 years now. Now you can imagine the joy that must have filled their hearts as they sang. A new day had just dawned in Israel. King David had been appointed as the king. There was hope, there's exulting, there's rejoicing. It was a happy day. They want everyone to know that the Lord reigns. The Lord is king, and his glory surpasses all. So in verse 3, it says this: declare his glory among the nations. But what does that mean? I mean, we need to know what the glory of the Lord is if we're going to declare it, right? Declare his glory among the nations. Well, 1 Timothy chapter 6 tells us that the Lord dwells in unapproachable light, and that no one has ever seen him or can see him. His glory is so bright that we can't look at him. It's like the sun. You know, if you look at the sun for too long, you'll go blind. But what you can see is the beams of light that come out from the sun. We can't look directly at the glory of the Lord, but it can be seen in the beams of light that come out from the Lord. So in this psalm, David, I think, has in mind 4 specific ways, or 4 beams of light, if you like, that God's glory can be seen. So the first beam of light that shows God's glory is salvation. So have a look there, verse 1. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. You know, in ancient Israel, when they spoke of God's salvation, they were speaking of the Exodus, when God redeemed his people out of slavery in Egypt and brought them into the promised land. Now, in the original context of Psalm 96, they were seeing centuries of God's promises coming to fruition at one time. God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 12 that they would be a great nation. God's promise that he would establish them in the land of Canaan, and he would remove from before them their enemies. God's promise that he would establish a king among them, and God's presence remaining with them, the Ark of the Covenant. So the Lord had saved them, and they were singing it with great joy, and that's why it's a new song. It's a song that has been birthed out of experiencing the Lord's salvation. That's what they're singing. They're saying, look, the Lord has saved us. Look at what he has done. Isn't he glorious? The Lord's glory is seen in salvation. Well, a second way that God's glory is seen is in creation. So have a look at verse 5. Verse 5, the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Any aspect of beauty or strength that you see in creation is there because it is a reflection of the Lord's strength and the Lord's beauty. The most beautiful sunset, imagine that in your mind, the most beautiful sunset you've ever seen is just like a pencil sketch compared to the Lord's beauty. Or the strength of the tallest Californian redwood tree that reaches up to 115 meters tall. That's just simply a matchstick compared to the Lord's strength. Majestic mountains, just a shadow of His majesty. Creation itself is a reflection of the Lord's glory. But God's glory is not only seen in creation, but also that He is over creation. So if you look down there in verse 11 to 13, creation itself rejoices before the Lord because it's subject to Him. The Lord's glory is seen in creation. Now, another way that David draws our attention to God's glory is in His holiness. Verse 9, worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. The Lord is set apart. He's perfect. There's no blemish. There's no mistake. He lacks nothing, and He needs nothing. He always does things right, and His plans are the best plans. He's eternal, with no beginning and no end. Angels are before Him, cherubim and seraphim constantly declaring His praises. Nothing unholy or sinful can stand in His presence. He is holy. The Lord is glorious in His holiness. So He's glorious. His glory can be seen in His salvation. He is glorious in creation. And He is gloriously holy. And lastly, God's glory can be seen in His rule. Notice that in verse 10. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Yes, the world is established. It shall never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. And then down in verse 12 as well. Then shall all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in His faithfulness. Now, when we read those words there, that He will judge the earth, that's not the kind of judging that we see in the Got Talent series. You know, it's not like the Lord is sitting behind a desk with a buzzer, waiting to see who sings well enough. Yep, you're through. Judge, in this context, is to do with His governance or His rule. So notice in verse 10 how those two phrases are held together. The Lord's reign and the Lord's judging are held in parallel with each other. The psalmist wants us to see those things as the same, as similar. So it's not simply that He will give everyone a fair trial, but rather that He will govern the world with justice. When the Lord reigns, there will be no injustice, no inequality based on your passport or your cultural background. And He will rule the world in faithfulness. So democracy and socialism and communism, they won't even be thought of, because He is a benevolent King who always provides abundantly for His people. Under the Lord's rule, no one will go hungry. There will be no homeless people. There will be 0% unemployment. And businesses will see sustained growth. And we can trust Him to govern perfectly. Even creation will thrive with vibrancy and life under His rule. It's no wonder that the trees of the forest will sing for joy. The Lord is a glorious and perfect ruler. So the Lord's glory is on display for us here in Psalm 96 in 4 ways: His salvation, His creation, His holiness, and His rule. But as clear as God's glory is in those things, there's actually one way that we can see God's glory even clearer. It's by seeing God Himself. Have a listen to these words from the beginning of Hebrews. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, through whom also He created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of His nature, and He upholds the universe by the power of His word. After making purification for sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. If you want to see the glory of the Lord most clearly, then look at Jesus. All things were created through Him. By Jesus, all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through Him and for Him. And Jesus is holy in every way. He is the exact imprint of God's nature. His salvation is a salvation that we will delight in for all eternity. We will never run out of singing new songs to the Lord because of His salvation. It's salvation not just for one nation, but for all people from every tribe and tongue and nation. And Jesus is the benevolent King who will rule forever. He will provide for His people for all eternity. So when it says there in verse 3, declare His glory among the nations, that glory is Jesus. As Christians, we have seen His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. That is glory worth singing about, isn't it? My wife has a great voice. And if you're in our house for any length of time, you'll get to hear her sing. Because every second phrase prompts her to sing a song that she remembers. It doesn't matter whether she's the one who said the phrase or somebody else. She just bursts into song. Maybe you're like that. Maybe it wouldn't surprise you to know that her favorite movies are Mamma Mia and The Sound of Music. It's like her whole life is a musical. But I've noticed that it's not the same for everyone. Some people don't seem to know how to sing. But whether you're singing out loud or not, singing is always something that comes from the heart. Singing in the context of Psalm 96 is the appropriate response to something that stirs our heart. So how is your singing? I don't mean your vocal skills. I mean the singing of your heart. What do you exult in? What do you sing in response to? What gets you excited? Maybe your team wins the basketball, or your favorite car just drove past. Or maybe it's when people recognize how good you are, your skills, or your popularity amongst your colleagues. Maybe you get excited about the latest iPhone or a new network gadget. Maybe you rejoice in having authority. You like to be the boss. You get that surge in your heart when you tell someone else what to do. You go do this, go do that. and you feel the power of the authority. You know, we can summarize each of these three things into three categories: power, people, and possessions. Power, people, and possessions. These are the gods of the peoples in verse 5. Idols. They're things that our hearts can turn to worship. It's anything that is not God. Maybe the reason that we struggle to get excited about the things of the Lord is because our vision is dominated by the gods of the peoples. Maybe we keep looking at the idols in our lives, and that's why we struggle to sing and rejoice in the Lord. But don't be fooled. See, when you see these idols in comparison to the glory of the Lord, they are worthless. They are useless. They're mute. They're stupid. They are unable to satisfy. In contrast, the Lord is glorious. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. There's no one and no thing that can even come close to Jesus in glory. So what are you singing in response to? When my heart sings, and what my heart sings in response to, will always show itself somehow externally in some way or another. Luke chapter 6 verse 44 says that a tree is known by its fruit, and out of the overflow of the heart the mouth speaks. Our hearts are always singing, and what we're singing for will always be shown in our actions and in our thoughts. So if I'm singing for the glory of power, I'll likely be dominating other people, or I'll be trying to manipulate other people with my words. I'll have a sense of satisfaction when someone begrudgingly does what I told them to do. Or another way it'll be seen is if I treat people as objects for my satisfaction. Pornography and lust are expressions of me worshipping power. This is what it looks like to worship the idol of power. Or if I'm singing for the glory of people, I'm going to do things that will get me noticed by people of importance. I'll want to please people. And I could always be worried. I'm always worried, what are people saying about me? What do they think about me? That is ways that you can see if you're singing for the glory of people. If I'm singing for the glory of possessions, I will feel that sense of joy and excitement when I have purchased something new from the mall. But that joy won't last long, and I'll be looking for my next purchase. Maybe you just love online shopping and you don't seem to be able to stop. Souk.com is your favorite website. Or maybe you've taken a loan for something that you can't really afford. You can worship materialism, though, even if you have no money, because it's what your heart is singing for, not whether you have it or not. So if I covet a sports car that I know I'll never be able to afford, that is just another expression that I am worshiping possessions. I want my joy and my satisfaction to come from that thing, even if I can't have it. If you're beginning to feel a little uncomfortable because you recognize that some of these things are true in your life, then I want you to know that that is evidence of God's grace in your life right now. He is beginning the process of showing you the futility of worthless idols. And that is the goal of Psalm 96, to point out how worthless these idols are by showing you a superior glory, the glory of Christ. Friend, the appropriate response to seeing God's glory, that is to seeing Jesus, is to worship Him. It's to give up singing for these worthless idols, to stop living for our own glory and to live for His glory, to find satisfaction not in other things or people, but in the Lord. If you feel like your life till now has been going from one worthless idol to another, if you've been singing for your own glory, then let me urge you to repent. Look at Jesus and find in Him something not only worth singing about, but someone who will satisfy you with joy in a way that power, people, and possessions never could. You could talk to one of the members of this church or one of the elders and go to the Lord and in prayer and ask Him to help you to see Jesus. But even if you're already a Christian, there's lots of ways that we can be tempted to sing for the glory of idols. I want to take this opportunity to zoom in on one way that we could see it expressed. And it's actually the second point of our sermon. Umawit sa Panginoon. Sing to the Lord. Did you notice how many times in the psalm those three words appear? Look at there in verse 1. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless His name. And then down in verse 7. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of people. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. It's the direction that our hearts are to be turned to the Lord. We are to sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord. So verse 8 says, ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. Now that word ascribe, it means to give. To give to the Lord the glory due His name. But how can we give something to the Lord? He alone has all glory and strength. We read that right here. He is the source of all life and all wisdom. We don't have anything, and what we do have has been given to us from the Lord. So the first step in ascribing to the Lord is actually to receive from the Lord. It's to turn away from worthless idols and to look to the Lord for strength and for joy and for salvation. And when we do that, there's only one appropriate response. It's to sing it back to Him. But we don't always feel like singing, do we? Imagine with me this. It probably won't be hard to imagine. It's Friday morning, afternoon. It has been a long week. The last thing you wanted to do today was get out of bed. But here you are anyway, rushing into the service, 15 minutes late. It's already been a difficult morning. The kids were complaining, the clothes weren't ironed, and breakfast, well, that was forgotten long ago. We didn't have time for that. And getting all the way here to deck in the middle of summer, it's hard. And the AC wasn't working on the metro, and then you had to get off the metro and get onto the bus, and the AC seems to be having problems in deck as well, and so I sit down in my seat, And the last thing that I feel like doing right now is singing. But I can't really just sit down, can I? Because, well, people will look at me. They'll think there's something wrong with me. So I stand up and I sing the words of the song anyway, because I need to at least look like I'm worshiping the Lord. And I bow my head at the right time, and I sit quietly, and I listen to the sermon, and the last song ends, and in my head, I check off the list, attend church, done. And immediately, my heart is looking for what I will be satisfied with next. Maybe it's the Merienda Ibn Battuta. Maybe that will make me feel happy. It's so easy to do, isn't it? We just go through the outward motions of worship, but inside our hearts are hardly engaged. You know, there's even been times where I've been up the front leading the singing, and in my heart, I'm wondering if people think that I'm a good singer. You know, we can be just like the people in 2 Kings 17:33 who feared the Lord but also served their own gods. Let's not do that. Let's not just go through the external motions of corporate worship without engaging our hearts to the Lord. When we do that, at some level, we are fraternizing with the worship of worthless idols, and we are robbing ourselves of joy in the Lord. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. That means look to Him for our joy and our satisfaction. Receive from Him strength and energy and sing it back to Him. So practically that means we turn our hearts to Him. Maybe you've had that kind of a week, maybe you've had that kind of a morning. When you come to church, sit and say, Lord, I am struggling to worship You now. I have been looking to my own strength. I have been looking to other things for joy. Forgive me, Father. Help me to turn my heart to You. And then we can sing. But as we're singing, it's not just that we are giving to the Lord. As we sing the words, You are holy, 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 what we are doing in that moment is receiving from the Lord and at the same time singing back to Him. We recognize that He alone is holy, and we receive from Him holiness. He has clothed us with the righteousness of Christ. That's a gift from Him. We must receive it. So our heart attitude is to receive from Him and sing back to Him and declare that He is holy. In the same way, when someone is up here leading us in prayer, our hearts can join with that person, agreeing in our hearts with the words of those prayers and directing our hearts to the Lord. And even as you listen to the sermon, we have the opportunity to look into God's Word, to receive and to worship the Lord as we respond to it in our hearts. But here's the thing, it's a choice. Worship is not something that can be done for you. I can't make you worship. You have to engage your heart. You have to look to Jesus and respond to Him. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18 says that when we behold the glory of the Lord, that's Jesus, we are transformed from one degree of glory to another. Beholding God's glory changes us. We begin to care less about what other people think of us and more about whether they are seeing Jesus also. And that brings us to our third point. umawit sa lahat ng lahi, sing among the nations. I wonder, did you notice who this psalm is directed to? Look at verse 1 again. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. And then down in verse 7, ascribe to the Lord, O families of peoples. See, when it says families of peoples, the phrase that we use for that today in English is people groups. It is ethnic identities that aren't necessarily bound by political borders. It's not countries, but ethnic groups of people. So in the Bible, a nation is a group of people bound together by ethnicity. Psalm 96 isn't David telling the Israelites to go out and worship the Lord in other countries. Psalm 96 is David calling the nations to worship the Lord where they are among the nations. It is massively global in its scope. The whole earth, verse 1, is to declare His glory among the nations, verse 3. The families of people, verse 7, are being called to say, the Lord reigns among the nations, verse 10. Now, let's think for a second what this is actually saying. Remember, this song is written by King David and it was sung as the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Jerusalem for the first time. And it's hugely important in the history of Israel. And it is defining for their national identity. So why is this psalm directed towards other nations? I mean, surely we would expect something like this. Sing to the Lord, all you Israelites. Declare how great God is and that the ark is in Jerusalem. And then go out and declare to the nations how glorious the Lord is and invite them to come in and worship here in Jerusalem. Right? That's what you might think. Perhaps you've thought of it like that before too. Like the choosing of Israel was God's plan A for letting the world know about Him, but they didn't really pass the audition. So Jesus came and He opened it up to everyone else. No, Psalm 96 is actually saying the complete opposite. That it has always been God's plan to bring salvation to the nations. His choosing of a specific people, the Israelites, enabled His relationship with them to be recorded in history. That way, God's character would be obvious for all of us to see. But they weren't chosen because they were somehow better than any other nation. God's purpose in choosing Israelites was always to call to Himself those from every people group. So, David says, declare His glory sa lahat ng lahi, among the nations. Did you notice how it doesn't say, declare His glory to the nations, but among the nations? Among the nations describes people worshiping the Lord where they're living among the people. So, Psalm 96, read by a man in Croatia, can read this and say, I need to sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord among my people here in Croatia. At the same time, a Filipino lady working in Japan can read Psalm 96 and say, I need to sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord right here in Japan amongst the Japanese people. And the Syrian refugee who's recently become a Christian is right to read this as a call for him to declare the glory of the Lord to the Lord among the Turkish people where he has refugee status. Do you see the significance of this? It is God's global strategy and call for all people to worship the Lord in all parts of the earth, so that the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Now, don't mishear me. What I'm not saying, I'm not trying to downplay the significance of going to another country with the gospel. There are still many, many places on earth where the gospel has not been proclaimed or believed, and some of us probably need to heed their call to go. But all too often, we reduce the Great Commission by limiting it to those few Christians who have left their country for the gospel. But hear the message of Psalm 96. The Great Commission is not plan B, where super Christians go to other countries. The Great Commission is plan A, and it involves you right here in this country, the country that you live, among the peoples that you live with. Can you see the implications of this? Every one of us in this room has not only left the country where we lived, but we are living among many nations. We have opportunities in Dubai to cross cultures with the gospel that those back in the Philippines or Australia or South Africa, they just can't even imagine. And I'm not talking about a church program to reach a specific group of people. I'm talking about when you are at the checkout counter at the grocery shop, or when you are at the shopping mall, or when you are catching a taxi home, or when you are at your workplace every single day of the week. Crossroads, we have some of the most incredible opportunities to declare the glory of the Lord with people we would otherwise have never met if the Lord had not brought us here to Dubai. So let's not settle for keeping our heads down, working hard, and providing for our families. As good as those things are, and we must do it, but Psalm 96 is a call to live for much more than that. Psalm 96 is a call to live for the glory of Christ right here in Dubai. So practically, here's a few very quick things to think about, ways you can start doing this. First, pray for unreached people groups. There's an app you can get on your phone from Joshua Project, and it helps you to pray for different people who are unreached with the gospel. As you pray, it changes your heart towards people. A second thing, learn how to greet the people that you regularly see in their native tongue. So I learned a long time ago how to say magandang hapon po, because I was always speaking with Filipinos. If you want to greet an Australian, you need to say, "G'day, how you going?" You can do that. See, it's not that hard. It's not magic, but it opens a door. It says that you are interested in them and you're interested in their culture. And a third thing to do is eat food from their country. So for me, if I'm going to the Philippines, I'm going to eat Filipino food. I like isaw. I like balut a little bit. But when you show interest in someone else's culture and you are willing to eat their food with them, again, immediately, it opens up doors. It's easy ways to cross cultures. You don't have to learn the language fluently, and you don't have to love the food all the time. But as we cross cultures that way, we are opening up the doors for opportunities to share the glory of the Lord with other people, the people that we would see regularly in Dubai. Another thing is to spend time socially with people from another culture. Now, I know that it is easiest to hang out, to spend time with people from your own culture because it's comfortable. They understand you. You don't have to work hard. But I want to encourage you, make time to spend time socially, not just in your workplace, but outside your workplace with someone from another culture. Push yourself to engage with other people and get to make friends with them. You know, third culture kids are particularly good at this. Third culture kids, if you're a parent here and your child is here, maybe they were born here, they're growing up here, your child is a third culture because they're not growing up in your culture, but they're not growing up in Emirati culture, they're growing up in a third culture. All right? Third culture kids are very, very good at crossing cultures because they're not constantly comparing everyone to one culture. They are willing just to accept people as they are very easily and are very good at learning how to cross cultures. So if you are a cross-cultural kid, a third culture kid, or you have third culture kids, God has given you an incredible gift. It's a gift that you are to use for declaring the glory of the Lord to many people. But that is what we must do. We must declare the glory of the Lord. We must tell people about Jesus. It doesn't have to be awkward. Just explain what you read in the Bible about him and how he has changed your life. You know, some of the contestants on the Got Talent series are really good singers, but they're singing for the wrong glory. We have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. It's the glory of Jesus. What a reason to sing. What a person to sing to. And what a privilege to call others to join us in worshiping him. Sing the glory of the Lord to the Lord among the nations.